Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Madhava Kunja Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Ballava Girivaradhare Gopi Jana Ballava Girivaradhare Yashodanandana Rajatanaranjana Yashodanandana Rajatanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Ballava Girivaradhare Gopi Jana Ballava Girivaradhare Yashodanandana Rajatanaranjana Yashodanandana Rajatanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Vishnavad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Status Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki. Shri Giri Govardhan Ki. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki. Sankirtan Yagya Ki. Gopremanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 21, Instructions by Maharaj Prithu, Text 41. Correct? Text 41. Ajnati Ananta Kalo Tattva Kovidai Shraddha Hutam Yan Mukha Ijya Namabi Na Vai Tata Chaitanaya Bahish Krite Hutashane Paramahangsya Paryago Ajnatyananta Kalutatva Kovidai Shraddha Hutam Yanmukha Ijanamabe Navaitata Chaitanaya Bahishkrite Hutashane Paramahangsya Paryago Ashnatyananta Kalutatva Kovidai Shraddha Hutam Yanmukha Ichyanamabe Navaitata Chaitanaya Bahishkrite Utashane Paramahangsya Paryago Ashnatyananta Kalutatva Kovidai Shraddha Hutam Yanmukha Ichyanamabe Navaitata Caitanya Bahishkrite Hutashane Paramahangsya Paryago. Mataji's. Ashnati eats. Ananta, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Kalo, nevertheless. Tattvako Vidai, persons in knowledge of the Absolute Truth. Shraddha, faith. Hutam, offering fire sacrifices. Yatmukhe, whose mouth. Ijyanama be, by different names of demigods. Na, never. Vai, certainly. Tata, as much. Chaitanaya, by living force. Bahikrite, being bereft of. Huta ashane, in the fire sacrifice. Paramahangsya, regarding devotees. Paryago, never goes away. Translation. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ananta, eats through fire sacrifices offered in the names of different demigods, he does not take as much pleasure in eating through fire as he does in accepting offerings through the mouths of learned sages and devotees. For then he does not leave the association of devotees. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to Vedic injunctions, a fire sacrifice is held in order to give food to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the names of the different demigods. While performing a fire sacrifice, one pronounces the word Swaha in mantras such as Indraya Swaha and Adityaya Swaha. These mantras are uttered to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead through demigods such as Indra and Aditya. For the Supreme Personality of Godhead says, Naham tishtami vaikunte yoginam hridayeshuva tatra tishtami narada yatra gayanti mad bhakta. Which means, I am not in Vaikuntha, nor in the hearts of the yogis. I remain where my devotees engage in glorifying my activities. It is to be understood that the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not leave the company of his devotees. Fire, excuse me, fire is certainly devoid of life, but devotees and Brahmins are the living representatives of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, to feed Brahmins and Vaishnavas is to feed the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly. It may be concluded that instead of offering fire sacrifices, one should offer foodstuffs to Brahmins and Vaishnavas, for that process is more effective than fire yajna. The vivid example of this principle in action was given by Advaita Prabhu. When he performed the Shraddha ceremony for his father, he first of all called Haridas Thakur and offered him food. It is the practice that after finishing the Shraddha ceremony, one should offer food to an elevated Brahmin. But Advaita Prabhu offered food first to Haridas Thakur, who had taken his birth in a Mohammedan family. Therefore, Haridas Thakur asked Advaita Prabhu why he was doing something which might jeopardize his position in Brahmin society. Advaita Prabhu replied that he was feeding millions of first-class Brahmins by offering the food to Haridas Thakur. He was prepared to talk with any learned Brahmin on this point and prove definitely that by offering food to a pure devotee like Haridas Thakur, he was equally as blessed as he would have been by offering food to thousands of learned Brahmins. When performing sacrifices, one offers oblations to the sacrificial fire. But when such oblations are offered to Vaishnavas, they are certainly more effective. Ashnatyananta kaluktatva kovadai shadahutam yan mukadijyanamabi navaitata chetanaya bahishkrite hutashane paramahangsya paryago. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ananta, eats through the fire sacrifices offered in the names of the different demigods, he does not take as much pleasure in eating through fire as he does in accepting offerings through the mouths of learned sages and devotees. For then he does not leave the association of devotees. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yes, so this is very interesting and actually very important point. Fire sacrifice has been performed by people in the Krishna conscious tradition or Vedic tradition, has been performed by such people for who knows how long, just very long indeed. It's regarded as being a standard activity for interacting, at least with the demigods, although here we read, Srila Prabhupada says that actually, even though these things may be offered to the demigods with mantras like Indraya Swaha, Adityaya Swaha, but actually the offering is going to the Supreme Lord. It's not really going to those demigods. They just, as representatives or assistants even, they just take the offering, the food offering, and pass it on to the Lord, who then actually eats it. So, and we see in the Hindu community, and even amongst devotees who have their backgrounds in the Hindu community, that this activity of fire sacrifice, it's really very popular, you could say. It really is. Although here Srila Prabhupada specifically is making, sort of developing the point onto another level, a much higher level and much more important level, that actually, according to the Vedic literatures, the Vedic injunctions, it's said there very clearly that fire sacrifices are performed, even though they're performed in the names of different demigods, but they're actually performed in order to supply food to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not, of course, that the Supreme Lord is hungry and feeling deprived, or he would feel deprived, or sometimes he may feel deprived if food is not offered to him. But ultimately, in that exchange, that the food goes to the Supreme Lord, then he is accepting in order to benedict the demigods, actually. I mean, at least the demigods who have personally taken part in the procedure of taking the offerings of food made by the people in general, even the demigod worshippers, and just passing it on to the Supreme Lord. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his mood of extreme renunciation or even total renunciation, he is not lacking anything at all, but simply to be kind and to help all the people involved in the process of him getting these food offerings. In order to help them, he accepts those offerings. Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Yes, although Prabhupada quotes two of the little mantras here, Indraya Swaha, Adityaya Swaha, this suffix aya means two. It is, in English, dative case. Do you remember that from school? Anyway, it's dative. Dative means two. Yeah, two or four. Four. Two or four. Yeah. So in other words, Indraya Swaha means two Indra or four Indra. Two in the sense of, because, he should get it. It's for him. But actually, he's just going to pass it on. And he'll get mercy through passing it on. And maybe he'll get some remnants also, you never know. But main thing, of course remnants are very important and very nice, but main thing is to be able to offer. Without that offering to the Supreme Lord, then, well, it just becomes a whole different thing, that actually it becomes an offering to the demigods, or to the particular demigod being addressed like that. So, and then, of course, then they have to take the karma. And they are not really, they don't really have the Shakti to take that karma. It will burden them. It'll definitely burden them. And they're not capable of just carrying just burden after burden after burden. They will, as happens with people on this level, our level, they'll just be crushed by the burden. They'll be crushed. Yes, and in that sense, therefore, that their involvement in the sacrifice will be actually detrimental. It won't be beneficial. So this is a very important point, that really these things are going to the Supreme Lord, or at least they're meant to. And in that sense, that in the situations where the offering to the particular demigod, that is the conclusion. That's what it all is for. Then we, as devotees or aspiring devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we do not take the prasadam of the demigods, because we, by doing so, would also become implicated in that process, which is a crushing process. Yeah. So what to do? Because it happens sometimes, not that often, but it happens sometimes, that we get offered some, Shiva prasad, or some, I don't know about Murga prasad, but some prasad or other from a demigod. I think what we do is say, well, it might be socially sort of awkward to just refuse. So maybe we'll accept it and say, yes, well, I'll have it tomorrow. And then we'll do something else with it later on. Yes, so this whole process of how in the process of demigod worship, that actually everything is meant to, and when properly done, everything does go to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's very nice. There are different reasons, but here in the purport, or in the verse, and it's mentioned in the purport also, in the verse, Prabhupada translates that the Supreme Lord does not take as much pleasure in eating through fire as he does in accepting offerings through the mouths of learned sages and devotees, and particularly devotees. And then he says, for then he does not leave the association of the devotees. Now, this is a very important point, actually, that the Lord is very devoted to the devotees. And the Lord likes to render service to the devotees. The Lord appreciates the devotees. The Lord loves the devotees. And he loves to associate with them. And if he has to, leave the association of the devotees in order to, you could say, associate with fire, which is just, inanimate, then for the Supreme Lord, certainly it's not as nice as being in the association of the devotees at the very least. And in fact, he may just feel not happy to just associate with the fire, even though he does it because it's a Vedic injunction, and he upholds the Vedic injunctions generally. But to associate with the devotees, particularly the devotees and also the Brahmins, who may not exactly be devotees, but they're they're spiritual, and they're in there somewhere, but they're not the same as the devotees. So this is another way that the Supreme Personality of Godhead relishes the association of devotees by the devotees eating prasad. Yes. And yes, eating prasad. So this is a very, very important thing. And it's said, and I don't think it's exactly said here in this many words. Yeah, well, it is. That he gets the greatest pleasure in accepting offerings through the mouths of learned sages. That's more the sort of Brahmin type, and devotees. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means we must please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's our life. So does it mean we must eat lots of prasadam and just more and more and more because the Lord is enjoying it? Well, in a certain sense, I'm sure some would argue that. And there is a point. But anyway, there are other ways to serve the Supreme Lord. And if we make like a total specialization of serving him by eating prasadam, and just on and on and on, and on and on and on, eating prasadam, after a while, if we eat too much prasadam, we won't be able to serve him in other ways, like doing kirtan and going on harinam, and we'll become incapacitated. So, in moderation, Srila Prabhupada with new devotees, I remember, and I imagine you remember too, because it's a standard thing in ISKCON, but I remember being told very enthusiastically in my very early days in Krishna consciousness that Srila Prabhupada said about taking prasadam, that you should, when you're really new, you should eat and eat and eat until what? You waddle like a duck. Hare Krishna. Anyway, Prabhupada, at least they told me that. I understand that Prabhupada said that. So, but yes, that doesn't mean that devotees should just eat voraciously every time. Whenever the Mahaprasadam, there's Mahaprasadam 6 times a day. So we don't need to eat 6 times a day, sumptuously. But just as required, and the Lord will be pleased with that. And then if we do it just as required, then we'll be energized to do other services, which will also please him. And approaching it on that basis will please him more than just making a super specialization of just eating and eating prasadam. Although some have done that. But anyway, yes, so fire is devoid of life, but devotees and Brahmins are living representatives of the Lord. So how, if foodstuffs are offered into fire, what is that really? It's not so good. Sometimes, of course, it's said that the fire is the mouth of the Lord. But as is emphasized here, it's emphasized sort of repeatedly, actually. And I read the purport of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur to this verse and his translation of the actual verse, and he was really emphasizing it extremely strongly, that in the verse itself he emphasized that fire is inanimate. Fire is a thing. It's not a living being. So even though in a sort of, certain sense, it can be said that the sacrificial fire is like a mouth, or sort of a mouth of the Supreme Lord. But still you can't overlook the fact that it's still fire, and it's inanimate, and it's just not the same as things being whatever, food or just whatever, being offered to Brahmins and Vaishnavas, and particularly Vaishnavas. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport here goes to some lengths to give a very nice example of this point. And it's the particular incident, famous incident even, which Prabhupada mentions, it's there in Caitanya Charitamrita, it's there in Caitanya Bhagavat. Not only is it a matter of offering food to a devotee as opposed to just a fire, which would be the normal practice in that Shraddha ceremony, but the particular devotee that was offered to Advaita Acharya Prabhu was, from the materialistic point of view, in a sort of questionable situation for being offered, for some special honor to be offered to him in this type of situation. And even as Prabhupada describes, that it was the Shraddha ceremony for the father of Advaita Acharya, and what you do you should offer food to an elevated Brahmin. So, but Advaita Acharya called for Haridas Thakur, come, I'm going to offer you, it's called the Shraddha Patra. Patra meaning plate, the special plate of prasadam from the Shraddha ceremony. So he specifically called Advaita Acharya and did not call so many others who he could have called, and so many others who may well previously have been called in such in similar situations, and who might have even expected or hoped to be called, but Advaita Acharya didn't call them. He called Haridas Thakur, who was born in a in a Muslim family. So according to the social standards, that would be out of the question. It'd just be completely out of the question under those circumstances. And even Prabhupada makes the point that Haridas Thakur himself protested that, wait a minute, don't offer it to me, offer it to some, there are many nice Brahmins in that area there, that sort of suburb of Navadvip, offer it to one of them. But Advaita Acharya said, no, you are more advanced than any of them. In fact, what did he say? That by feeding you, I am feeding millions of first-class Brahmins. By feeding you first. So it could not be a better way of dealing with who to give the Shraddha Patra to, that special plate of foodstuffs or prasadam from the performance of the Shraddha ceremony. And then Prabhupada points out that Advaita says that if anyone objects, any of these Brahmins object, why didn't you offer it to me, or at least to one of the other senior Brahmins from around here? That Advaita said he was ready to speak to that Brahmin or any learned Brahmin on this point from Shastra and prove definitely that by offering food to a great pure devotee like Haridas Thakur, the blessings he would get from doing that would be equal to the blessings he might have got if he'd offered that food to thousands of learned Brahmins. That's a pretty powerful statement, isn't it? And, among other things, in terms of the comparison between Brahmins and Vaishnavas, which has been discussed over the last several or so many verses and may well be discussed further. Yes, that the devotees are on a higher level than the Brahmins. Of course, you can have Brahmin devotees, that's another thing, but just the regular Brahmins who are not devotees, generally they are on the impersonal side to some degree. And they're not devotees by definition. So, yes. So this is a very nice point, and through doing that, in order to emphasize this point about the Lord in that situation of accepting offerings of food via the food being offered to the devotees and eaten by the devotees, The Lord makes the point that he doesn't leave, he remains in their association through being there while they're eating that food. So to emphasize the point, Srila Prabhupada, and it's just interesting little thing, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur does not mention this verse, which Prabhupada quotes. It's Narada Muni, no, it's the Supreme Lord speaking to Narada Muni. Naham tishtami vaikunte, I'm not in Vaikuntha. You won't find me in Vaikuntha. Yoginam hridayeshuva, nor in the hearts of the yogis. So tatra tishtami Narada. Therefore, where am I? Where will you find me? Yatra gayanti madbhakta. I will always be, I remain where my devotees engage in glorifying my activities. Yes. And again, it's Prabhupada emphasizing this point of the Lord really loving the company of the devotees. And this is one of the ways in which he does that, and so he really loves it when the devotees take prasadam. Hare Krishna. Comments, questions, additions, subtractions? Prabhu.
Maybe you can elaborate on this further, but when we look in our disciplic succession, like Prabhupada, when they were having the inauguration of the deities in Vrindavan 50 years ago,
Right.
he said that the chanting of the holy names is more important.
Right.
And Lord Caitanya emphasized that. And when we look in the Gita, Krishna mentions Pachram, Puchram, Phalam, Toyam, offer food. He mentions about japa and kirtan and enlightening one another. And he says that they offer the sacrifice of hearing in the fire of the controlled mind. But even in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna doesn't mention doing fire sacrifices, does he? I mean, that's something we do. It's part of it, but it isn't emphasized.
It's definitely not emphasized.
No.
Yeah.
It's amazing that Hindus miss out on that with
Right.
Lord Caitanya and the Gita.
Yes. Thank you.
You can elaborate on it more?
Oh, well, you just did. Well, I mean, it's a fact, you know. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna emphasizes devotional service, actually, the need to perform devotional service, and he emphasizes also, I mean, in the same context, how the devotees do devotional service. And particularly like Satatam Kirtayanto Mam, that sort of situation, chapter 9, verse, 15? Or that chapter 10, verse 9. Yes. He emphasizes how the devotees relish glorifying him. They really relish it, glorifying him together. But fire sacrifice, it's an interesting point. I'll look it up to see if Krishna mentions it. I mean, there's, you know, in those verses you referred to, that's, what is that? Chapter 4, right? Or chapter 6?
Which one? What mentions?
The fire of the controlled mind. Yeah.
He's talking about sacrifices. I believe
That's
in the
4.
6th. 4. It's in 4th chapter.
The 4th chapter.
He talks about different kinds of
Yeah,
sacrifices.
different types of sacrifices. But he says in the fire of the controlled mind.
Well, it's indicating that that's more important than doing the...
And having an actual fire.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else? Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.